Some of you may be wondering how to create the same type of thing but have the beams a different color. Now this we could do using a synth. So let's try this out here. What we would do first is let's create a new shape. We'll just use a well, we could use a cone. We'll make it yellow. Then we'll create another one, and we'll also make it a cone. This one will make it, let's say, dark blue. But what we'll do is we'll select beam mode on this one. We can adjust the amount of points. And once we're done, we have both together. So we have the yellow solid cone, and then along the cone we have blue hot beams. Let's see how it looks. We just have to assign it to zone. And we'll show it. So there we go. So now we have the same type of thing. We have a yellow cone with blue hot beams. We could even add some speed or rotation to the blue hot beams. This effect works very, very well with waves, creating wave type effects. Understanding captures. Why use local Q in captures? If we go to captures, and we look at the options, we see two options. We see capture as local Q and capture as shortcuts. Now the difference is, if we capture as a local Q, it prevents the original capture pieces from possibly changing the capture. Now I'll give you an example. I have these three pieces down here, the red, the green, the blue line. I've created a capture as a local Q to this Q here. Then I've created another capture of these three as a shortcut, which is the other option right here. So this one is a shortcut capture, this one is a local Q capture. Now, if I were to modify or change one of these pieces, so let me change this one. We'll just change that line to, say, a cone. Let's see what happens. Okay, that's changed. And the capture has now changed. If we go over to this one, we see that it hasn't. So this one, because it's a shortcut that points to these three, it will change if any of these pieces are modified, changed, moved, or even deleted. Now, one thing to remember is local cues, although they have the benefit of retaining their structure without being changed by modifying the original pieces, these local cues do use more memory. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Another feature of captures is sequence mode. So essentially there are two modes. There's capture mode and sequence mode. If we go to sequence mode, let me just go to a new cube here, and we'll create a sequence mode. Okay, so now what we can do is we can actually drag cues down here and create a sequence. So it's sort of like the VLJ, the virtual light jockey, except we can define which ones are going to play in sequence. So, okay, I've selected these 5. I want them to play in sequence. I want them to change by beat, let's say every 4 beats. So I've created that. We'll just drag it to a cue. And I'll just open my preview window. And we'll play it. So you see that every 4 beats now, it's changing So this is the sequence that we've created. Multi-zone captures. So one thing that's really, really fun and easy to do is to create multi-zone captures using the Beyond universe. So let's create a few. So I'm going to select 2 different zones here. And I'm going to add, let's say here we have this queue. Now I'm going to select multi-queue, and I'm going to add a few more zones. I can add these zones down here, and we'll give a different queue to it. We could do, let's say, fan. So now we have these playing. We can even add 2 more if we wanted. And let's put a hot beams here. We can add this one. So now we have quite a few things going on. One other thing we could do is change the color. Let's say we wanted to change the color of these beams, these white beams on the top. So what we would do is we would select those 2 zones, and we will change the color. That queue, let's say to red. Okay. So we've created this, and now what we can do is we can capture it. I'll just go to the webinar page. Let's capture it as a local queue. So capture, and then we drag it to queue here. And I'll press blackout, and we'll try it out. So let's open up our universe. Now notice that these 2 zones are currently selected in the universe, but if we play the capture that we've created, it's going to go to the original zones that it was intended to go to. Let's create one more. So, let's say we go with these 3 here, these 3 here. We could put a wave. Go with this wave. And we'll select the top 3, make sure we're in multi-queue mode, and we'll add this other wave up here. And just for fun, let's throw a quick effect in there. If we add a fan through, so now we get a fan through. Okay, so let's say we decide that we like this. We can capture it. We'll do a capture. Make sure we're in capture mode. Capture this guy. And just black this out. Go to the webinar page, and we'll drag our capture over here. And let's try this one out. So once again, regardless of which zones you may have selected here, this capture will play on its originally intended zones when captured. So now we have this going. Now let's say just for fun that we have this going, but we only have upper zones. So we could force all of this upwards. Or we could bring it back down, or we could play back and forth between it. There's a lot of variations you can do to create very complex multi-projector looks. Give it a shift and make it random. Now for a few tips and tricks. I just want to show you something with the geometric correction. Let's go to projection zones, and we can just go to the geometric correction. We have here two options. Universal geometric correction, which is all of these items that we're used to, and we have a newer selection here called a freeform mesh. The freeform mesh, you can actually just grab the four corners and just set your zone exactly to the object or the surface that it's projecting onto. So it's a really quick way to do a combination of geometric corrections. Now the one thing that I just wanted everybody to know to avoid any confusion is before you use the freeform mesh, you should set your universal geometric correction to maximum size, because the freeform mesh is applied afterwards. So if we were to apply the freeform mesh, well, it would be only starting from this size and shape here, and then the mesh would be applied only to this. So you would not be able to use your mesh to bring this down in this area. So once again, if you're using the mesh, you want to make sure that you're maxed out with your size. Some people wonder how it would be possible to scan wide with lower scan rates and scan narrow with higher scan rates from the same projector. Now this is entirely possible and quite easy to do. If you go into projection zones, here we have a tab called Effect. So what you could do is, let's say that you have atmospheric zones and you're scanning at, maybe 40 degrees scan angle. So there you'd probably be running 20, 24K for your images to retain their shape. Now, if you want to create a graphic zone with the same projector, much narrower, and scan at much faster rates, maybe 30 or 40K, what we normally do is we set our base scan rate when we're setting up our projectors. Let's say we'll set them all to 24K, and in the case that we have graphic zones here, what we can do is select the graphic zone, then go into Effect, and we'll add key effect, and let me just zip down the list here. Here it is, scan rate. So you can actually add an effect to the projection zone. So let's say we're at 24K. You could adjust this slider to say 150%. So if you were at 24K, this slider is adjusted to 150%, then this graphic zone will now scan at 24K times 150%. So essentially this zone will now scan at 36K. So this is a real easy way to have different scan rates for different zones that are coming from the same projector. Another neat little option is in the configuration settings. Let me just open this up here. Configuration. Under the tab Live Control, we see Slider Max Value. So what does this do? Well, if we look at our size slider here, right now it goes from 0 to 100. Now sometimes when you're doing live control, actually I found quite often, especially when you're doing graphics, if you have a graphic that's a little bit smaller and it's not quite filling your screen, you want to make it bigger, but wouldn't it be great to be able to drag this slider more than 100? So in the configuration, if you set the size slider max value to 200, now we have a lot more headroom. This is 100%, and we could actually make everything bigger, up to 200. You could even go to 400, depends what you set in the configuration. Physics. What is physics? Physics, it creates smoother movement. I'd like to give you an example here. I kind of compare this to the steady shot feature of a camcorder. If we look here with the physics turned off, if I go to the position pad, if I shake my mouse back and forth, well, it definitely shakes everything back and forth in the image. Now if I turn on physics and I shake it back and forth, I'm doing the same shaking movement I was with the physics turned off, and you see how much it's smoothed out. So it gives us an easier control of the position pad, and there are some settings. You can play with the mass, attraction, and friction settings, so you can have much better response on your position pad. Disk and Time Fun. This is a neat little toy you can find under the Master tab. So here we have a disk. Now if we grab the disk, we can actually scratch or control the effect like a DJ. We can grab it, bring it back, shake it back and forth, release it back forwards. We can, with this button down here, we can reverse the playing direction. So we can go backwards, forwards, so we can change the direction. And we can do a set jump, so we can set it to jump to a point, let's say here, and here. So now it's only going to play between the last two clicks that I made. So let's just try it again. Jump. Make it a little bit clearer. I can just set a forward and backwards loop for you. So there's the first point, there's the second point. So now it's just going to remain looping between those 2 points. It's very similar to the features that you'd find on most of the new DJ and CD players. A couple things about the timeline. With the timeline, there's a really neat feature where you can take and drag one track item over another. So here we're going to get a cross cut. Let's play it, and I'll show you what I'm trying to explain here. So we have the man running, and then it's going to cross-cut to the kayaker. So a very quick and easy way to put your graphics on the timeline and have some nice transitions in between them. Something else we can do is run a show and perform live at the same time. This is really cool. One thing we have to do first is we have to go into the configuration settings, And under the MISC tab, there is an item here that says stop playing when switching between grid, timeline, and playlist. You'll have to make sure that this is not selected. So once you've made sure of that, we can go over to the timeline and we will start playing this little show. And we'll switch back to grid. We'll bring up our universe. So our show is running. And while our show is running, we could also perform live at the same time. So our show is running up here, the graphics show, down here. We're adding in some live performance cues.